So I guess I thought we'd probably start off by talking about what we do like about the tech industry. I don't know if you guys have any really anything that you're really passionate about as far as like why you like working in this industry so much, but I figured I would hand it over to you guys to open up the discussion.
Jim, you're
I don't
way
mind
more in.
starting.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So I think we talked about framing this as tech, is it worth it? And that's a loaded question for me. And I feel like I see many sides of this equation, right? So on the good side, you'd be hard pressed to find a job like tech in terms of the things that it allows for, right? So pretty high salaries, lots of work life flexibility. So tons of people in tech work from home or work hybrid roles. We don't really have job hazards for the most part. Sure, your eyes get fatigued, you can get the carpal tunnel and stuff like that, but there are super dangerous jobs out there that you could have. There's super physical intensive jobs that you can hurt your back or whatever on. And like tech in general, I think like affords a lot of like luxury that tons of other industries don't have. I sometimes I think about my, sorry, you look like you're disagreeing, Brian.
I was gonna say, what about hemorrhoids? Come on, we're all sitting down all the time.
That's true.
Well,
I forgot about that. That does balance out with the hemorrhoids.
in my career, I've had to rack a 120-pound battery by myself.
Okay.
So mm,
Maybe I'm thinking
I,
programming.
I,
Sure, tech is,
yeah, I consider that a
yeah.
hazard. And I've also had to climb a 20-foot ladder to put a wireless access point on a ceiling. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, but you're picking out 2 points in a long career, right? So like, is this like a daily
I-
occurrence? Is this something you've done twice in 20 years, right?
It depends really on what type of company you're working for and what your job role is. I mean, if
Mhm.
you're working for a managed service provider and your company is doing a lot of things like helping clients set up offices, like that's a lot of your job.
Sure.
So, yeah,
Fair enough.
and not I don't know if this really counts as tech, but yeah, I'll say it does. Like technicians and stuff like that come to your house to like install stuff like that. They have to worry about like
Sure.
electrical work and those sort of things.
No, definitely.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
was actually wondering like how broad is this definition? Like, so like Stephanie works in HVAC, right? And they have technicians that service all sorts of equipment and like huge industrial equipment in different areas. So if we're expanding our definition to that, then sure, I think that encompasses a lot more. I'm thinking mostly like software developers, cloud engineers, DevOps, that kind of thing is what like I'm
Yeah,
basically,
well, in that case, yes, there's basically no workplace
yeah.
hazards.
And it's pretty cushy. I think I mean, it's kind of like I don't know if Bill Burr had this joke about like moms being the hardest job in the world, but like it is true. Like it's
Yeah.
like any job that you can do in your pajamas, basically. Like it's not like it's not that hard. I feel like most days I wake up, I am in my pajamas for like the most part of the day until like I have to go outside at some point. Yeah, it's pretty nice. Like I think there's lots of interesting problems to solve. I really enjoy the work for the most part. I don't know. I'm passionate about lots of areas of tech, but I don't want to occupy all the time. So Brian, why don't you give us what you think about the good parts?
Lots of the same reasons you're talking about. Flexibility is probably my biggest one that I think of right away. Is just lots of companies aren't tied to a 9 to 5 type of thing, whereas other positions you have to drive to a location, do a bunch of physical work, and come back. So obviously that's a big one. It is a nice paying job, so I'm not really saying anything new that Jim's saying here. And yeah, how about you, Jay?
For me, I don't, so I realize things have changed recently as far as like the job market goes and stuff like that. But back when I was entering tech, back in my day, the barrier for entry was pretty low, right? So
Mm,
like I'm not saying my degree is worthless. I got a degree in physics and but like it has nothing to do with technology. Having majored in physics, I did get exposure to stuff like Linux and programming and things of that nature. But one of the best techs that I know over here, he has a degree in geology. And like uh, most of my friends over here didn't major in any form of technology degree. So I do think that is such a huge positive because most job descriptions that I see, they really want you to have a bachelor's degree, which I completely disagree with, but that's another thing. It doesn't like you can use tech as like a fallback option if like your career doesn't seem to go the way that it does. I see people on Reddit all the time who's like, I've worked as like an account manager or something like that for so many years, and like now I'm transitioning into like IT support. So as long as you're willing to put in the effort and to learn the things that you need to learn, like I don't think that tech is as hard to get into as a lot of other industries out there. It's hard, especially now, don't get me wrong, but it's not as difficult because like if you want to be a lawyer, well, your only option is to go to law school, right? So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I would almost rephrase it as there's almost no gatekeeping, right? Because yes, the barriers of entry are low, but it is a difficult job that requires a lot of effort and constant training and like sharpening of skills. Like I wouldn't say it's an easy route, and I would say even continually for someone who's been in the industry for a while, like you still have to continue to work hard and learn things. And it's not a job for a sleuth or someone who's lazy, right? I think it's difficult, but you're saying, there's no real barriers. Like most places that you could get hired at will take someone who can do the job, whether they have a degree, whether they have any like formal education, like as long as they can prove that they have the aptitude for the job, a lot of places will take that person on, which I don't think happens in many other industries. So I think that's really cool about tech.
Yeah. The other thing that you mentioned, Jay, was you can transition to it. You were mentioning in a previous one that how it is you rarely see entry level jobs posted. Do you still? I know you transitioned from what your potential plan was to what you're doing. Do you still think it's a viable option to transition now?
I think you certainly need to be aware of what job that you should be targeting as opposed to what job you want, right? Like, so for example, if you want to get into cloud and become a solutions architect, you're not going to do that as your first job, right? It's just going to be something that's pretty impossible to do, just getting AWS certifications and then slotting right into that title of solutions architect. You need a background of experience so people can listen to you and know what projects you've worked on and stuff like that. I think some of the lower level jobs, like say like help desk and stuff like that, those roles I think are still pretty easy to get into without experience. Having said that, you are probably competing in this market with a large number of people. So, and I mentioned this before, you in one of the other episodes, you gain experience without having it professionally, right? So you do have all of the tools that you need to learn what it is that you want. You can set up a lab in AWS even if you only care about like Windows on-prem infrastructure, and you can practice on that. You can go on Udemy and buy a course and take some of those like entry-level certs and stuff like that. So yeah, I think it is still very possible. It just is a little bit more competitive than it was when I was doing it.
Gotcha.
Especially, I don't know if you guys have seen like the recent news, but like it's really popular on some CS threads on Reddit that I have been looking at. Like Tesla, I believe, just laid off
10%.
13,000 employees or something like that. And everyone on those subreddits is like, well, it was already competitive trying to get like these jobs, and now we're going to be, because a large number of those roles were actually like developer roles and stuff like that, coding roles. And now they're going to be competing with people who have like Tesla on their resume, you know what I mean? So yeah, I still think it's possible to get in entry level with no experience, but like I said, there's a lot more competition out there right now.
And scale matters too, right? So like obviously a few thousand people is a drop in the bucket in terms of the tech job market in the US alone, right? So scale matters, but there has been a trend. So Elon did that thing where like when he bought Twitter, he like basically cut the staff in half, and then another like quarter left because they were upset with how he was running management. But it set a trend for like after he did that, Meta took note of it, Amazon did too, and collectively they laid off tens of thousands of people, right? So like this could be another round of people needing the bravery of some successful company like Tesla doing it, and then other people might do it. So I do think there has been a series of layoffs in tech, and I don't know how long that continues. I think high interest rate, and I know this isn't an economics podcast, but like high interest rates historically they tend to lead to those type of behaviors, right? Because lots of companies finance their growth, and as that gets more expensive, that tends to happen. So I think the tech is, we're talking here mid-April 2024. I think tech is pretty competitive at the moment, especially for entry-level people. These things are all cyclical though, so I don't think tech is dead by any means. I know lots of things are happening with AI, and we've talked about this in the past. I don't want to steer this completely in AI direction, but I don't know. The more I've been playing with AI and the more I've been seeing and seeing new models released and everything, I'm not convinced without like pretty serious innovation that next leap forward is going to happen soon, right? Like some of the new models are coming out, they're bigger, they should be better, but they fail on tasks that older models didn't do, or sorry, did previously, but now the new ones aren't doing, but they do other stuff. So it's like, it's whack-a-mole with AI. And then in my own experience, using it in my coding life, like it produces enough hallucinations where it's not super useful to me. Like it will make up syntax and then it will debug its own syntax and it'll know that syntax is incorrect, but like then the next second it won't. And it's just like, it's helping, but it's also hurting. And I'm not convinced until that next epiphany happens in AI where they figure some of the stuff out that we're going to like just skyrocket to the moon where humans are irrelevant. I just don't think it's happening right now. I actually expect that there'll be like a lull in AI and humans will be hyper relevant again. Companies might start hiring again when they realize that AI is not solving all these problems they think it's going to solve. And then there'll be an innovation. The same thing will happen again. And this will cycle up over time. And I think AI is going to be a huge part of the future, especially in tech. But right now, I think we're in a hype cycle. Everyone thinks they can replace their dev teams with AI, their designers with AI. And I just don't think that's going to happen in the next few years, at least. That's my prediction, at least.
Yeah, I think the general consensus, again, from I'm basing all of this knowledge or content from what I source from the ever reliable Reddit. But that seems to be the consensus around like most devs on there. They're like, yeah, this just can't do what we do. It's just not even
It really,
close.
I mean, there was that demo. These it was a controversy on like Twitter, like maybe I don't know several months ago. Some company released this product called Devon, and it was supposed to be like this autonomous AI developer that can do end to end products, and like basically is it's leaked out through or people are like putting this together through their demos and stuff that like they're basically some of the demos are faked and they're like not as useful as they thought they'd be. And it was really just like an investor grab that has no real product yet. And again, I don't know anything about this company, so don't sue us. I'm just saying what I've heard online. But so I think a lot of that's happening. I'm not saying it's all grift, but like it's just people are fantasizing that it's farther along than it is. And someday I fully expect that. I don't know. I have the opinion that humans aren't really as special as we think we are. I think we are just a really advanced AI. I'm not sure we'll see human generated AI ever advance to the human level in our lifetime, but I just think we're really advanced AI. So I don't think we're special, but I just think we're so far from where we need AI to be super useful today. And I don't know when that'll happen, but I think we have a ways. So that's just my thoughts.
Yeah, agreed. And relating to the AI stuff, so you mentioned the fact that companies think they can just replace developers or other personnel just with AI and stuff like that. One of the things that this might be a little bit controversial just because of the industry that I'm in, but from my standpoint, usually companies doing what I want to be doing, they seem to be pretty stable, right? Like all of these mass tech layoffs you're seeing from these big companies, I'd say small and medium businesses don't really work nearly in the same way, right? Like I don't think I've ever worked for a company that's actually started laying people off on the tech side of things. I'm wondering what your guys' thoughts are on that. Like I know Brian, obviously you're employed with the same company for a really long time. Have you ever noticed anything like that? Because like I realize it does happen to people, but these seem to be on the rare side, in my opinion. I realize it seems like it's now happening every year for these major companies, but like I said, smaller and medium business, I just don't really see that going the same way.
Yeah, so our company has historically not had any layoffs, and this past year we actually did. So it has
Oh,
happened
okay.
even for our company, which was a shocker for our whole company because they prided themselves on the fact that they never had to actually do that.
That was the first time in history. Was this
Yeah.
last year?
Yep.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. It
Interesting.
was very small and it wasn't like a bunch of senior people or anything like that. But it was something that happened in our company for the first time, which was surprising. So I have seen it. You seem like you got lots of this idea.
Yeah, I was just going to say, just to put this into perspective for people. So Brian's company has been around since 1969. So 2024. That's a it's a pretty good length of time to go without ever laying people off.
Yeah, And that's why they've prided themselves on it. And I don't know all the gists of why it happened for us this year compared to any of the other past years or anything like that. And I won't even get into that. But it is something that happened, and I don't know. It can happen at any level. I don't see it happening for us again, and it's not something that I'm worried about happening for me. But yeah, I guess it can happen at any level. And you're saying that you haven't seen it at the medium level?
Yeah, no. So for context, most of the companies that I've worked for, aside from one of the big four companies, they've all been somewhere between 5 and 200 people. So yeah, I've never experienced anything like that. I'm curious to know, do you happen to know like what the breakdown of the types of roles that they laid off, like lost
Yeah,
onto one side?
it was all people under 6 months that had been hired. I think they hired, and then they saw the growth of the year. I Again, don't sue us or whatever. But basically, they didn't see the forecast going exactly how they wanted it to, and they let the newest round of hires go, basically. So that's how it happened for us. I get so
like
nervous about talking about specifics of
yeah,
my company for whatever reason. I'm sorry if I'm
Oh,
dodgy about
don't
those
feel like you
questions.
have to.
yeah. Well, we can bring it back more general. So like again, I'm a little bit removed from it, but from what I see, it seems like there was a massive overhiring in tech in like COVID era tech, right? Because I think there was some interesting things happening. It looked like digital and like SaaS companies were just like going to the moon because all of a sudden everyone was at home and they had to figure out, how do I do conferencing digitally? How do I pay these bills digitally? How do I reach out to people? How do I do like all these things? Oh, maybe I should do SEO. Like all of a sudden this big boom happened and it seemed like we were going to the moon with demand for online services, right? And I think Zoom and these companies just like completely like blew up and everyone was trying to see that. And I don't know, maybe not every company operates this way, but it seemed like there was an overhiring happening. Like basically it was like a developer grab. It was like, if we don't grab this potential developer, then someone else can grab it. And either like that's going to hurt us doubly because we won't have the talent in house, or it's going to hurt us because they'll have the talent and they're going to compete against us or whatever. Right. So everyone was just trying to hire to make sure we get every last drop out. And then I think people realized that like there was I don't know, because I'm coming from the employer perspective, right? So I was trying to hire for a while and like I couldn't find qualified people at rates that I could pay because I run a small company. And it was really frustrating because I think Google and these other companies were paying people $300,000 a year to sit on the bench, basically. Like they didn't even care if you were useful at that time, right? And I know that's an outlier a little bit. Not everyone was making that, but like it was like super competitive, and so it was challenging for like small companies to hire at that time. And it just seemed like, I don't know, it seemed inevitable that eventually like someone like Elon, I think, was going to come along and say like, hey, like we're running basically like a text app that just like shows like a few characters at the top of a list, right? Like, do we need 3,000 engineers or whatever to do this? And he's like, no, we don't. And then they cut the staff and the platform basically seems unchanged. If anything, the pace of development on the platform seems faster, although maybe there's more bot action. I don't know. It seems like there's maybe more bots these days, but I don't know. So I think a lot of companies are like, wait, do we really need this deep of a bench? It's costing us crazy amounts of money. And like, maybe we overbought this tech boom. And I think people corrected. So I don't know. I think it's a correction to overhiring, honestly, but I don't know what you guys think.
Yeah, no, I think I would agree with that too, 100%. Especially what I'm also reading about because those big four consulting firms, which I've worked for in the past, they have a similar situation where they can hire you and then you literally have no work to do for like five months, right? So that's
Yeah.
basically what happened to me when I started at the big four. Like I'm getting paid all of this money to just sit here and do nothing. Which is great if you don't really care about doing work and advancing your career and stuff like that. You just want to collect a paycheck, but it does seem as though that is starting to come back around and they are also having layoffs. So, like I said, I do think in general, tech is pretty stable from my perspective. The type of companies that I want to work for, the type of work that I want to be doing. So, yeah, I guess my last comment would just be pick the correct industry, I suppose, that you're working for.
Yeah.
Just make sure that it has the stability that you care about. But just to move away from that topic, I wanted to talk about one of the other things I like in tech, which is all the opportunities that you get to actually like put your hand up for stuff that you've never done before that you will want to assist with. So literally every company that I've ever worked for has always been like someone will post in a group chat somewhere where your whole team is a part of it, and then being like, hey, we have this project, we don't have anybody to work on it. Is there some one of you that wants to at least take a stab at it first and then come to one of the more senior people with questions when you have them? I feel like that's the best way to learn. And I'm not sure too many other industries work that way. Like you're not gonna have a heart surgeon. You're not gonna have a heart surgeon be like, "Oh, I'm gonna put my hand up to this brain surgery." You know what I mean?
Yeah, thank God.
So, so yeah, right. So I think it does give you a lot of freedom to explore the things that you actually like, right? Because I had no idea at all going into tech. It was just a job I took because it was paying more than Brian's company was. And then through that, like, don't get me wrong, I hated the first year because I was bad. I didn't know anything. I thought it was all just like siloed into this one area. But then, like, the longer you work in it, the more that you realize, like, oh, there's like far more to this than I ever could have imagined. And there's so just almost unlimited amount of paths that you can go down to find something that you actually want to do. And I'm not sure how true that is for other roles. I just want to ask you guys, have you experienced the same similar things where you've worked where you can just, hey, I want to try this? Jim, you have your own company, right? So it might be a little less relevant, but I guess like early on. And Brian, obviously you've been there for a really long time. So wondering if you've had that chance as well.
Why don't you go ahead, Brian?
Sure. Yeah, there has been several times in my career where I've been asked to, if I'm interested in joining either the different groups that work on different products, which lead to different technologies. So yeah, and I 100% agree, Jay, that it is you're not pigeonholed into one specific thing, which makes it's a little bit exciting in terms of the fact that like you can take your career in different directions and know that you can either fall back on your old knowledge or you can grow. So I definitely agree with that. So yeah, I've had several opportunities in my career. I've taken some of them, I've passed down some of them, and it's if I was to like say to someone coming out of tech now or like coming out of high school, coming out of college, whatever, that wants to go into that, I think that is probably the one thing that I would tell them is that like you can bring your career in any which direction. Don't find a little pigeonhole and go down that or stay in it, because you can do a lot of things, and sometimes it takes a while to find what you want to do. And I know I've not necessarily been in a pigeonhole, but I have stayed with the same company and I found what I wanted early. But looking at both of your careers, you've grown a lot in doing different things. So you guys are two great examples of that. But Jim, what about you?
Yeah, I worked at a startup. It was a bootstrap startup. So I think it's a little bit different pace than like a venture funded startup. So like a million miles an hour. Bootstrap startups a little slower, but I worked on a small team there, and yeah, I had a lot of autonomy over picking things. Like they let like I would like research. I was into like tech podcasts and stuff, and so I brought like this was I don't remember early maybe like 2013 or something like that. I brought like people weren't doing like pre-processing for CSS back then, so I brought like Sass to the company. I brought all these tools and like methodologies that I thought were good. I've gone full circle now where I think meta frameworks and stuff is all BS. Like go back to basics. So I did things that I hate now, and I brought all that stuff to the company at the time because I thought it was the right thing to do. And I think lots of junior people do that. That's an aside, but yeah, I had a lot of autonomy to do things and grow in interesting ways and try different things out. I like solving problems in different ways now, and solving problems, not only tech problems, but like business problems and finding those spaces. But the one thing that I will say to caution people is that tech is this infinite treadmill. At some point, you will realize it like after you've been in tech for about a decade, you realize that all the same problems start getting cycled back on each other with a different tech stack, a different product line, all these different things. Like you'll realize it, but you're like, oh, if I just do this and if I can get that there and if I can do this, then I'll have like the perfect thing. You have this idea that you're going to find this like, okay, it's going to be cheap. it's going to be efficient. I'm going to be able to like deploy this and make a lot of money. Like you have all these ideas in your head of how you're going to fix all the BS of the last time that you did it. Right. And I'm telling you right now, it will always have its own like set of crap. And you'll realize how, like, I'm solving problems the opposite way that I used to do it, right? Like dead simplicity and whatever. But it's somehow the problems end up being the same in a different way. And you get in this loop where like tech is infinite and you can tire yourself out chasing cars just to realize that you literally on a treadmill that will go forever. And it'll go as fast as you want to go to. You can turn it up to a sprint and be like, oh, I'll get there faster. It's like, no, it's a treadmill. It'll go forever. You can sprint as hard as you can. You can go slower, but you'll never get to this promised land that you want to get to. So I do love the ability to pick my own future and pick my own ending or whatever. But just keep in mind that you have to do it in a sustainable way because there's really no end. There's no end to it. You just go on forever.
Topic that I wanted to discuss before we change gears is probably my favorite part about tech in general is just the problem solving and development aspect of it. You know what I mean? So like, obviously I'm a cloud engineer, primarily dealing with AWS. I really enjoy it when a company comes to me with a problem and they have no idea like what they even need for the solution, but they tell you something and then you actually get to architect it yourself, right? You get to design it. You get to try to convince them why this is like the best method of doing it this way. They might push back and say like, oh, we don't have the money for this. Can you design this in a cheaper way? Then you got to go back to the drawing board. All those factors, like that's probably the most fun part about the type of work that I do is because like if I could design a system in the way that I think it should be working, it's probably going to be out of like 95% of the company's price range for what they actually want to pay for. So it's really cool that I get the opportunity to look at it in multiple different ways. Like maybe this one customer doesn't care about money and they want it like the most absolutely secure that you can possibly make it. Or one company doesn't have the money to make it as secure and you have to find workarounds to make it the best that you can within their budget. And honestly, I've worked with some pretty great clients, especially the last couple of years. I really don't mind getting on the phone with them, Zoom meetings, whatever. Like it's usually been a great experience. So that's probably my favorite part about working in the industry. I don't know how much you, Brian, really talk to customers, but obviously, Jim, you do. So you probably know all those pains as well. So,
I can speak to it. Yeah, I like so like you, Jay. My favorite type of client relationship, and it hasn't always been like this for our company, but clients who lean on you for your expertise and they come to you with problems and you help them find the solution, right? So, and I actually try to steer my clients this way too, and not to be a pain in the butt, but like a lot of times clients will be like, I need this thing, and they try to tell the solution that they want to see. And it's always helpful to be like, okay, what problem are you experiencing that leads you to believe that you need this thing, right? What is the pain point? Because oftentimes there are solutions that maybe they aren't even aware of, or like things that you can uncover that will like really help with how you're going to architect things, and really uncovering like the underlying pain point and understanding the problem is really helpful for developing the solution in most cases. I like solving those problems too. We have some really great clients that are amazing to work with. We have some clients that like they could be developers or QA people in another life. Like that's not what their focus is, but they are so good at diagnosing problems and like sending clear tickets with error codes and screenshots. It's just like some of my clients really blow us away. And we've worked with other folks that are at the other end of the spectrum where everything is a little obtuse and challenging, and it's hard to move people to identifying problems versus solutions. So I've been on both ends of the spectrum. The former are fun and they reinvigorate you, and I like solving those problems like you do, Jay. The latter, I've had a few that have drained me, and it makes me want to solve different kinds of problems, to be honest. So I don't know. It runs the gamut. A lot of it comes down to the people that you end up working with, and I strongly suggest if you are in a position where you have more demand than supply, you should be picky about who you work with, because every door that you open, you're closing a door to someone else that you might enjoy working with. So just make sure you're aligned with the right people, and I'm sure you'll be a lot happier that way. So.
Yeah, I don't get much client interface. I actually wish we had more. Not that I have a ton of time to be able to do that, but it is something I get a lot of personal reward out of completing a project and figuring out problems just like you, but I don't get to see or hear the end result as much as probably you guys do in terms of it helps my users at a hospital figure out their day or make their day easier and all those type of things. And at one point, our company was they were sending everybody out, testers, coders, designers, all out to the hospital to just watch people work at hospitals for a day or two, and so you can see them go through the process of registering an account or whatever their position was. And I never actually got to do that, but I thought it was a great idea from my company because you can see the pains, you get a little more personal with your end users that you're trying to help. And so yeah, I wish I had more of that personal connection to the clients to feel that gratitude from both sides, because you feel good about helping them, you fix the big problem, but then I send it off and I'm happy that I did it, but I don't get to see the end result at the actual site. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that reminds I love sitting down with users. Like one of the most gratifying experience I had, a client that I've worked with for many years. It's a very prominent school for visually impaired. Most people can probably figure out who this client is, but we did some screen reader testing with non-visual folks, and it was amazing. Like it just like seeing people use like JAWS, or I use a program called Orca. That's a Linux screen reader, but like just seeing how people use this at full speed and like the way they navigate the web it really opened my eyes to a lot of things and made me passionate about accessibility. That's like a big thing that we do at our company now is accessibility. We're like super into best practices and spend a lot of time researching and testing and doing that kind of stuff. And before that, I didn't, right? Maybe it wasn't that relevant in web back then because people were figuring that stuff out for the first time, but also like, I didn't really know about it. It was always an afterthought. And after sitting down with folks, it's really fun. Like it was a new problem to solve that it sparked like an interest in me that hasn't left. And even though I started doing that, the first time I sat down with someone was probably over a decade ago. But yeah, it's cool. Like opens your mind to new things, especially seeing how you can actually make someone's life better directly instead of just like hearing it through the grapevine.
Yeah, that's really cool. I've never actually gotten an experience like that before. Like I've had lots of clients tell me like, oh, like what you've done helps me, do my work better or something like that, but never actually like impacted someone's life. So yeah, that's pretty cool.
You get the other side too, though. Every time you have like a bug or you like wrote some crappy code, you like see them struggle with it, like, oh, that's me. Like I know, like I did that. Yeah. So you get both sides.
So before we switch gears, because I do want to touch base on the negative aspects of working in tech, do you guys have anything left that you'd like to add about the positives that we haven't covered so far? Let's take that silence as a no.
Nope, not for me.
You guys, tell me what your biggest pet peeve about working in tech is.
I think the hamster wheel, like Jim described, how you'd put a lot of work and effort into things, and at the end of the day, it's still all there waiting for you to come back and do some more. There's obviously projects where it ends and you wipe your hands of it and you go on to something new, and that's always good. But there's another thing waiting for you to hamster wheel on. So that's one of them. Go ahead, Jim, if you got one. You don't have to go all mine and all yours.
Well, like what you're saying, Brian, hamster wheel, this is a little bit different, but it's adjacent, is my products have a really short shelf life. So like I'll kill myself for a project for 4 months or whatever, where, up at night or stressing out or this or that. And then websites live for like 3 to 5 years, 3 to 6 years, something like that. And so they get thrown out. And I've been in tech long enough where it's like, you work on something and then it's great for a while and everyone's happy and then it gets thrown out. So that's challenging. And then also along the hamster wheel aspect it is a hard job. At least like if you're an active contributor on a developer team, it's a challenging job. I've gotten to the point now where, and maybe it's just because I'm getting old, that might be part of it. I'm 36. I'm optimizing my life for my job. So it's not like a thing where you just wake up and you show up and you roll out of bed and you're there and like, it doesn't matter what you do and then you're done at the end of the day. Like I actually I'm trying to be focused on like when I go to sleep, I'm actually trying to eat foods that are not inflammation promoting, so I can think clearer. Trying to stay hydrated. Like I actually want to optimize my body so I can think well enough to do my job at some reasonable capacity. And I know when I'm not on, like if I haven't taken care of myself, like I can't do my job to the level I need it to be done. It's not like something that is easy. I almost think of it like getting ready for like running a race, right? Like when you have a 5K, like you get ready for it. And for the most part, I try to get myself ready to put out some output, because at the end of the day, I don't get paid by my time in the seat. I only get paid by getting something done. So I'm trying to get better at that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd say for me, stress is probably the worst thing in tech. There's a lot of that, and also the I've worked for a lot of companies that basically you'll sign a contract with them, right? And it'll list your hours. Over here in Australia, I think full time is 35 hours a week, but most companies have you do 37 and a half. But they always include like some language saying like 37 and a half hours, but also any reasonable amount of extra work that you need to do, right? And that can become a very slippery slope very fast.
Oh yeah.
Like I know I've worked at places where if you leave at the end of the day, and they basically want people that are working there that like this job is what their life is. And
Sure.
for good or for bad, I've never been that way. I work to live. I don't live to work. I like the work that I do, especially now. But I've been in tech since 2011. I'd say the last 3 years have been the best, and I haven't been afraid to volunteer to do nights or weekends or whatever. But that expectation is almost at every company that I've worked for,
Wow.
maybe aside from two or three. If well, just another example, like one of these things that I hated so much working at a MSP over here was like your shift ends at 5, right? And so there's like a help desk sort of role. Somebody calls and everyone else is on the phone. Your phone rings and it's 4:57 and you're supposed to leave in 3 minutes. The expectation is that you pick up that call and you troubleshoot to the end of that call. And sometimes that call is a 5 minute password reset. And sometimes that call is the whole network is down in the office and it needs to get resolved. And you end up leaving at 7:30 instead of 5 o'clock like you were supposed to. So yeah, I think companies can do a much better job helping their employees have a reasonable outside of work life.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have experienced anything like that. Obviously, again, Jim, with your business, like this is how you make money. So you're the boss. You decide when you work and when you don't.
Yeah.
But Brian, like, do you have much expectation to work extra hours?
So the couple times that we are there, you can sign up for on calls for weekends, holidays, those type of things, but they're not required of you. Um, there are certain times whenever there's sites that are going live with that are brand new customers or certain PPAC for a really high hospital group, then we are asked to be ready to go if needed, and they give us a schedule of like, hey, this is the time frame where you're not on call, but you're the guy in charge. So there is some of that, and I will agree there can be a lot of pressure. Just to if I don't want to make it sound bad, but there's a lot of pressure to make sure that you are contributing as much as you can to the group. And if you're not, then you don't always get the best projects and all those type of things. So I think there can be a lot of pressure within this industry in many different ways, and that can lead to a lot of stress. And I'm sure between you two, you guys work on, well, you in particular, Jim, because if something goes bad, then you and your other employee are the only ones that can really fix the issue. So there's no like, oh, there's an issue, somebody else can handle it. But yeah, why don't you go ahead, Jim?
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. The saving grace is that we don't have life-saving software, so that's nice. But yeah, I think I try to strike a balance more so I have a guy that works with me that everyone's aware of. I think we've talked about him before. And I try to be fair because I don't want, like, for instance, actually, I was working. I work most nights, and I was just like, it was like 7:30. It was this week, and I didn't realize, I just lost track of time, and I was starting to chat him about some, like, I was just like QA testing some stuff, and I had some questions, and it was just not urgent at all. And he was like responding to me, and then I realized what time it was, and I apologized profusely, right? Because that kind of thing, disrupting his life outside of work hours, should be like a rare thing. It should be for emergencies, and but we do have some expectation that he would help in those scenarios if needed, right? So there is that. There's been a couple of times where we deploy anything that could potentially break an app, so like migrations, those kind of things. We do those after hours, after business hours. So he's been available for those type of things. But I try to be fair in general, and I try to, if there are ways to make up for that time, like he's stayed later, like by leaving early a following day, then we try to do that too. But yeah, balance is tough. I don't know. I think there's always a push and pull. I used to think that managers and bosses and owners and stuff, they just want to extract people and they don't care about people. And now that I'm in that position, you realize this is a very real competitive survival instinct that kicks in, that you just like you wish you could just make everyone happy and like, oh, be a cool guy and like do whatever, like work and like take the day off or whatever. But you have to make money, and it's not easy to do. And sometimes you have to do hard things, or like take losses or work more hours than you can bill. And there's all these like external pressures. You get pressures from both ends, from clients and employees. And it's just like, you have to reconcile those. I feel like you're constantly trying to fit those things together in a way that makes people not want to quit or fire you. And you just try to fit the puzzle pieces together. And it's hard to get the balance right. But yeah, that's what I feel like, that's my job, is trying to connect those parties to make everybody happy. It's like a peacemaker. I feel like it's like the number one thing that I do, because the incentives are completely not aligned naturally, right? Like clients want to get as much as they can for free yesterday. An employee wants to not work nights and weekends and take abuse, right? They want to have a life balance. So like you have to try to figure out how to make it work. And that's challenging.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting hearing your perspective because like I've only ever been an employee, right? I've also never even been in like a management position. So I've never had to meet those goals for a team where like I'm overseeing a whole team and I need to make sure that like this team is delivering this much stuff and stuff like that. So yeah,
Yeah.
I guess the key, right, is the term reasonable, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you don't want to be making everyone work an extra 2 hours a day every day for like weeks at a time. You know what I mean? If
Yeah.
if
Try
that's
that.
the
It won't
issue,
work.
then you're running your business wrong, right? So
Sure.
yeah, you certainly need to be able to adjust. Yeah, well, I guess another thing that I wanted to bring up, and this really comes mostly from my days on service desk, difficult clients, that is probably one of the worst aspects that I've had to deal with as far as, and this is really being specific to like user support. You got somebody calling up being like, Excel's broken for the third time this week. And like, obviously now there's much other options. You can use like Excel Online instead of using it directly from your computer and stuff like that. But the amount of entitlement like a lot of people have, especially when they're calling like the service desk, and it's such a wide range of knowledge that you need to know, right? Like it's not just how a computer works, it's how this particular software works that you're using. Each client that you support, maybe you have 5 or 6 main clients that you support, they're all using different tech stacks and stuff like that. And everyone's like, what do you mean you don't know how to fix this issue? You're supposed to be the expert. And I guess that, again, like my first point, it brings in a lot of stress to the job, especially if you're a newbie and you haven't gotten used to dealing with these people. I don't really know what's worse, actually dealing with the people or the stress from not knowing what the answer is. Both are pretty rough. And I've been in plenty of situations where I was stressed because I didn't know what to do and because the person was being an asshole. So,
It doesn't make it
yeah,
easier.
no, yeah. So that comes basically from my service desk experience, of which I have like 3 or 4 years in my history. So, yeah, I'd say that's probably caused me the most amount of stress in my career to date. I'm not sure what you guys have really had to deal with. I know, Jim, you said most of your clients are pretty chill. And Brian, I guess your clients would probably be internal as
Well,
far as like,
yeah, different types of issues that come across their plate, and there can be priority events, which are very high, big issues that are happening at hospitals that are either restricting, at the worst cases, obviously, restricting care to an actual client because they can't get the right data for whatever reason, blah, 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 blah. Those are very high pressure situations and very stressful. I've been a part of a couple of P2s, which are like a level down, and it's, yeah, the clients aren't happy. You're very stressed because you got to get it done yesterday, and they needed to get it to the site so hospitals can work. And that's knowing that a hospital isn't working to the most efficiency can weigh on you a lot because it's like,
Yeah.
you know, if you personally go into a hospital and hear that you can't get whatever care because of the software system, you'd be pissed. So and all the employees that work there are going to be pissed. So there can be some situations that are very stressful, and it can be very taxing. So those are my experiences with stress in terms of high pressure stuff. Jim?
Yeah, I feel like I'd be repeating a lot of what you guys are saying, but the one little thing that I'll add, my own personal experiences, I'm realizing, and maybe I'm changing again as I get older. I don't know. I realize I'm a pretty sensitive person, and like client interactions, like they weigh on me, like all sorts of that stuff, like it weighs on me emotionally. So I'm trying to take a stoic approach. I got this little book. It's a compilation of like a couple like Stoic philosophers like Epictetus, and I think it's called the Manual. It's like this little bathroom book. You can read it in one poop. You can read it when pooping. So it's great. It's got all these like little Stoic, like it's translated Stoic sayings, and it's great. Like I find it very helpful about how, like, your external environment doesn't have to influence your internal reactions to things, basically. But it talks about all sorts of things about like work or death or any of these things, and I find that helpful. I'm trying to be more stoic in my approach to these things because, yeah, dealing with like difficult clients or stressful situations can certainly weigh on you, and they don't necessarily just weigh on you for the hour where the thing's happening. Like I can think about it for nights or weeks or whatever if there's an interaction that's not positive. So it certainly, yeah, if you care about what you're doing and you're closely involved with that stuff, it can be challenging for sure. I've definitely struggled with that myself. So yeah.
Um, yeah, I've actually worked for a company. This was before my cloud days that supported another company, a gas company, and basically they had this program on a server in their office, and this thing was responsible for regulating the pressure in the gas tanks. So if that thing goes down, I think you had something like 30 minutes to an hour to like fall back. I don't really remember how it was set up. I didn't support them too much, but the company, they were one of our clients. And it's just like you might start having like gas tanks blowing up over in the UK
God.
and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean that, yeah, I guess that sort of relates to Brian's example about a hospital, right? Like things could go really bad in a scenario like that. So
Man,
yeah.
you guys make me feel like I have it pretty easy. It's funny. I find myself being super stressed. I don't know why. Like it's just there's no reason, but you guys have a lot more like, I don't know, objective stress with those kind of things for sure.
Mm. And yeah, I guess one last thing that I wanted to mention on this topic was I don't remember, so I'm gonna have to edit this part.
I feel better because your
I
memory's
have
so
like a
good. It's
generic question. Yeah, I know.
yeah.
I have a generic question that I can ask you both, Jay, if you want to do that.
Yeah, okay.
All right. All right. So if I have a random generic question for both of you, if your kid was 18 and looking, say now, or in the next 10 years, they're going to turn 18, and they really like the tech industry, would you say
Ooh,
go for it? Yeah, this is something that's going to be around for the next X amount of years in your workforce days? Or would you say maybe this isn't the right place to go for your starting career?
So real quick,
that's
so
tough.
they're 18 today, Brian, or is this 18 years from now?
No, 18 today.
Okay. Jay, go ahead.
Or they're 16 or whatever, and they're looking to get into this path that we've all taken.
Yeah, that's tough. I have a hard time trying to feel like I would even be able to give advice on that because like I can't even picture what else I'd be doing with my life. Like I find something that happens to me a lot of the time is when I'm reading again on Reddit. There's a subreddit called Our Jobs, and I see that a lot. And people are asking questions about particular things, and I always find myself writing responses specifically how they would relate to tech and not like any other industry, if that makes any sense. So like I'll answer it in the way that makes sense for the tech industry, but for accounting, it like everything that I said doesn't make any sense. I wouldn't even know what I'm talking about to talk about like what the accounting industry looks like or the finance industry looks like. So I'm not even qualified to comment on the topic. But yeah, here I am like starting to type something, being like, oh, you really don't know what you're talking about. So I'm not really sure I'd be in a position to give a yes or no answer. I think I would educate them on what my path looked like, what was hard, what was easy, what I loved, what I hated, and let them know some of the growing pains that I had along the way. And I think the more information you can provide around your path for someone who's that young is just telling them the truth and letting them know how it was for you. And also giving them advice to say, if you do think that you want to go down this route, it's very important that you're selective about what path that you want to take, because some things for sure will not be relevant 10 years from now.
Okay.
So you'd have to really encourage them to look into, if they did in fact say yes, that they do want to go into the tech industry after hearing about all of your experiences and everything like that, they would have to do their own research to make sure that they're going to be going into a field that's actually relevant. I think tech will always be around, but what tech is still going to be here 25, 30 years from now, I have no idea. Nobody does.
Yeah, yeah. It's the reason why this question sparked for me was I had my son who's 6 years old sitting on my lap, and he was watching me. Uh, my company, don't hate me. He was sitting on my lap watching me work for a very short amount of time,
I
and
don't think he's going to take
I
the
had
trade
him.
secrets, Brian. He's going to go to free,
Yeah, I know
you
he's going
know,
to steal all that code
the
from the
No,
company.
we're not supposed to have our we're not supposed to be watching our children while we're working.
Oh,
But
fair enough.
yeah, but I had a little window pop up, and we programmed it to say like, "Hello, computer, my name's Henry," or whatever. And I was thinking to myself like, is this going to be like my job? Is it going to be archaic to him that we did this? And he's going to be 12 more years until he's even thinking about these type of questions. But yeah, the future of things for kids or 18-year-olds or whatever, I don't know. I don't know what to tell them. What about you, Jim? I like
Yep.
your thoughtful answer, Jay. There's a lot of truth to just saying what your experience was, but it's not knowing the actual future of things and choosing which path, because things can die so quickly in this
Yeah,
industry.
before Jim talks, I just want to say like I would never leave anything out. You know what I mean? Like I would want them to know like I'm decently successful to this point. I make a decent amount of money, but I would really want them to know like what the bad times look like. And I think that's probably the most important, because if you don't think that you can handle the bad times, then you're probably not going to get to the good times. So that's just the that's the last thing that I want to say on that.
No, I think that's a really great answer, Jay. Like talking about your experience, you could refer them to Human in the Hard Drive. There's a lot of great content on there about
Yeah,
experience in the
right.
tech industry. So okay, my first caveat, and this everyone's gonna roll their eyes, but I think it's important to not gloss over, is I would try to uncover this individual or this theoretical child or 18-year-old child, what their interests are, because tech is not for everyone. So make sure that first of all that they are inherently interested in technology and they have like an engineering mindset and they feel comfortable and they like those type of things and they're passionate about those things and they're not choosing tech for the wrong reasons, because you'll never have fun in that. And that goes for every industry, right? Like I think things are going to change all the time in every industry everywhere. Tech is not excluded from that. But taking on something because you think you're going to see the future is just a silly practice, right? Like you don't know, right? Like you could be a farmer and maybe farming will be the most valuable thing as an individual in 20 years, right? I don't know if that's true, but like if you're not a farmer, if you're not interested in that lifestyle, then like don't do that. That's a crazy thing to do. And I would say the same thing goes with tech, right? There are certainly, I have high confidence that there are plenty of long-term, long tail opportunities in tech, right? Like these things, like tech in some sense will be relevant for as long as I'm alive. I'll call that. Like I feel like I have pretty high confidence in that. What that looks like, I have no idea. But just like our careers have meandered, I've done operations and then like CMS work and then like database work. So I've meandered all over the place. And those, I feel like those experiences, they do roll into each other. So to act like, oh, I'm not going to go in tech because I don't know what the tech is going to look like in the future is a dangerous mindset, right? Because a lot of these skills build on each other in a weird way, even if they are completely different, right? So you learn, like when I first got into tech, I didn't know a lot about computers. I would have loved if I had some command line like Unix experience or this or that, and that could have snowballed into some of the other stuff I'm doing. Even if command line Unix is that kind of thing is something that nobody interacts with in the future, and that may be the case. But having that baseline knowledge will inform you to the reasons why the way you're doing the thing you're doing today, the way you're doing it, like how you got there and why that's relevant and why you don't want to go back. Because you can repeat history over and over again. Be like, so maybe there's an AI GUI system that you use in the future, right? And then like that has all sorts of problems because everything has problems. And you're like, why don't we just have like a text based whatever to interact with it? And you realize like, okay, that was the command line. So like there's this whole like cycle of understanding history and having relevant experience. So I don't know. I say if you're a person who's passionate about this stuff and you have an aptitude for it, certainly go into tech. I would not worry about the relevant aspect of this one particular thing that you're interested in right now because your interests are going to change, the industry is going to change, gain the experience, go into it. And I think you'll have plenty of opportunities. And I don't think there'll be any problem with that rolling into something that's relevant at some point. Technology is going to be around for forever. It might look a lot different in the future, but it'll be here, in my opinion.
Okay, so I guess I have a way to close this out, and I think I'll pop the question over to you guys. With everything that you've gone through up until today, had you known everything that was going to happen and get you to the point where you are today, having known that at 18, would you take the same path that you did?
You want to go, Brian?
Interesting. So I look at where I am and I'm very happy and I'm content. And so in that aspect, yes. In the aspect of a proprietary language that has constricted me in some ways, that part, no. So I would try to basically I would tell myself to try to before I get to 14 years in, make sure that I keep on top of exterior languages and technology a little more because I wish I was, and also take more opportunities within my job. Don't I didn't say no to everything, obviously, but don't say no as many times because I could have had other different opportunities at work. I may have closed some doors in. So I think that's one thing that I would have changed. How about you, Jim?
I think I have the bias that a lot of people have. It's this kind of like no regrets mentality. So I'm very thankful for my life and my relationships, and I have a lot of gratitude for the blessings that have been bestowed upon me. Right. So in that sense, like no, I don't. I wouldn't change anything about how I got here, and I think a lot of people have that perspective. I'm at it is funny because like if life is like Donnie Darko where there's these just different paths and you don't know where those other paths are, right? So like I'm in this path, so I'm thankful for this path, but I don't know what those other paths would have been, right? I'm at this point in my career where I'm trying to do this thing, be a successful entrepreneur in whatever sense that is. And I think it's one of those things where you never really reach the mountaintop. It's all these false summits. And I don't think there's any real ceilings. So you don't want to go on forever, but there are things that I want to do and things I've accomplished that I haven't gotten there. So in some ways, I'm at this point of friction and frustration in my career that like maybe if I had taken a different path in life, I would have had more satisfaction. Maybe I'm just perpetually unhappy in certain ways. But so like, I don't know, maybe there was a better path out there. I can't really argue that there wasn't. And if I was on the other path, I would be like, oh, I'm so thankful that I'm on this path. And I probably could even end up in a gutter somewhere and be like, hey, I'm thankful for my experiences because I grew in this way. So I think I would answer the same way no matter where my life has taken me. But yeah, I don't know. In general, I'm happy with where things are at. Jay?
Yeah, mine's a simple no. I
I love
think
it.
while I do really enjoy the stuff that I'm doing now, I've really come from more like a science way of thinking. So I think starting over again at 18, I would have probably chosen a different major that was more applicable to doing cool stuff. Maybe something along the lines of like chemical engineering or something like that, as opposed to something useless like physics. But yeah, I don't know. The reason I left school was it was too expensive. If school was less expensive, then maybe I would have stayed and I would have ended up in physics. I don't know really, but yeah, I think, like I said, I enjoy the work that I do now, but I think there's other stuff out there that I would like doing a lot better. And on that note, we've been going for about an hour and 10 minutes. So I think that's probably a good place to stop because we probably lost a lot of people already.
I have so many things I want to unpack in your answer, Jay, but we can save it for another week.
Okay, go for it. What do you want to say?
No, like obviously there's like sunk cost fallacy, right? So and I know some of these things that you might want to do require like a degree and whatever, and like, these things are challenging and they're expensive and whatever. But like, is there no way to dovetail where you are into this ideal path? I feel like you're a very competent and capable individual who's still relatively young. Like, don't be unhappy. Like you can go that way, right? I mean,
I wouldn't say I'm unhappy. I'd just say that I could be happier. And with the life that
sure.
I have now, I don't really want to put in all the work to start all over again at this
Okay,
point. You
yeah,
know
that's
what I mean?
fair.
Like
Yeah.
it's been hard enough getting here. I'm not really interested in starting over again. I'm not saying that I don't like tech. I like tech,
Yeah.
but I'm just saying there's things out there that I think are would be a lot more fun to be working on. That's all.
Fair enough. And I think if we're all honest with ourselves, like everybody settles in different ways in their life in many ways. Like, like life is all about like, you're trying to do all these things. You're like, that's good enough. That's
Yeah.
good enough. That's good enough. So I get that too. I get what
Mhm.
you're saying. And I would say that's certainly true in my life too. So yeah.
Right?
Not with my wife though. I didn't settle there, but reach for the stars. You know what I mean? Stephanie, in case
I had to say that.
you're listening.
Settled with our little group of friends here, right? Settled on you guys.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's for
Settle
sure.
with you guys. You guys were the best I could get at the time. But yeah,
That's not untrue, just for anybody listening. That's definitely
we
not
did grow
untrue.
up in the same, like 2 square miles from each other. Oh,
Jim was definitely the closest kid that I grew up to.
yeah, I know. That is the probably the reason why we're all on this podcast.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
No, right? Because we're on this path. I'm thankful. I'm happy.
Hey, I'm doing a podcast right now. I'm having a good time. So obviously things are working
Yeah,
out.
yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, thanks to everybody who stayed with us through the whole thing. Join us next time on Human in the Hard Drive. Thank you. That was a good one.
Oh, it's still recording.